Hi there folks, this is Jim King with NCEA. We are going to talk about the idea of engaged learning today. So first of all, we want to look at what is the need for engaged learning. Second of all, we want to talk about the idea of what is engaged learning. And last of all, we want to talk and look at the idea of what engaged learning looks like actually in the classroom. Catholic education in America took off over 150 years ago. It's a unique opportunity to develop our kids in their faith and academic lives. It's our responsibility to keep Catholic education thriving. Now, just because our tradition of Catholic education developed over 150 years ago doesn't mean our instructional styles have to reflect that era. Why? Is it just some need to be trendy? No, it's more than that. Okay, so for this idea of engaged learning, let's go ahead and talk about just what the point is of this style of learning. I mean, really, what's the need? We do need to ask ourselves, if the modern work environment is looking more and more like this, where there's high collaboration between co-workers, why is it then that our classrooms still look like this? Unengaged, teacher-centered. We can be providing our students so much more for the skills that they need in the future in their lives. In 2010, IBM published its study, Capitalizing on Complexity. The research looked at the agendas of global business and public sector leaders. The biggest challenge confronting these leaders? The rapid escalation of the complexity of the global environment. The second finding was these organizational leaders found it clear that their organizations were not equipped to cope effectively with the complexity that was in this new environment. Third, the study found that overwhelmingly the single most important leadership competency for the organizations that deal with this new environment was going to be the creativity and the thinking and problem solving of its personnel. We have to ask ourselves, are these the kind of learning activities that are going to inspire creativity, problem solving, and critical thinking in our students? Universities such as MIT, North Carolina State, University of Minnesota are all abandoning their previous instructional labs, lecture halls, and putting in new engaged learning labs. Why? Students need this new engaged type of learning. In these settings, it's no longer about an information transfer from the professor to the students, but it's about students actively learning how to learn. Here, students collaborate to find answers to working problems, to discover the information and present it and demonstrate their knowledge through discovery, through engagement, through actively doing. There are a great variety of styles that incorporate all the ideas of engaged learning. So let's talk about just what we mean when we say engaged learning. So there are a wide variety of methodologies that incorporate the pedagogy behind engaged learning. So what are those? Let's just use the same language here. The critical idea here is that students are engaged in the learning process. They are active learners. It is a student-centered learning environment. In the previous century, the idea behind our schools of instruction was that the instructor was filling the empty vessel. Students lacked knowledge, and therefore it was the instructor's job to fill them with the knowledge that the instructor had. Students were very passive in this whole process. It was a question of receiving what the scholar knew. Student-centered learning has gone and developed itself under a variety of names that incorporate this whole engaged learning style. So what are those? Inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, authentic assessment, the Teal and scale-up classrooms of the universities all incorporate this student-centered learning concept that is the heart of engaged learning. In addition, student-centered learning is behind the ideas of STEM, STEAM, STREAM, the 21st century skills, the flipped classroom ideas, and even those behind critical thinking. They are all about engaging the student in the learning process, not just being passive in the classroom. Let's go ahead and be clear too. Engaged learning is not about technology, not exclusively. A student who is not engaged in the curriculum is not participating in engaged learning. So now let's go ahead and discuss what are the different elements of engaged learning. What does it actually look like when you're in the classroom doing engaged learning with the students? So here's the reality of engaged learning. These classrooms are very active. There are multiple things going on. Students are in collaboration. They're discovering new information. Teachers are working one-on-one in environments with them. It is a very active process in which the students are really generating and discovering for themselves a lot of the answers that are being posed to them through this type of learning. It is sort of a chaotic process. It is not neat and tidy and quiet and orderly, but that's because real learning is going on, and so that is just part of the reality of this style of learning. It does lead, through research we see, it leads to stronger long-term retention, however. So engaged learning is not about the idea of memorization, of recitation, back of information. It is very strongly in a different strain and tradition. You won't have the teacher doing as much straightforward instruction, lecture. The textbooks are not going to be as prominent in these conversations in these kind of classrooms. It is a kind of learning that's going to inspire a deeper understanding from students, however. It's kind of funny when you talk to young students and ask them, what most often do you get in trouble for in school? Well, oftentimes that answer is talking too much.
Kids want to collaborate and work together. The modern workplace requires adults to collaborate and work together. And yet so often we make those activities against the rules in the classroom.
Now look, let's be realistic. Does this mean that there's never a time in the classroom for direct instruction, for some lecture, for a little bit of bookwork? No, that's not the point that we're trying to make here at all. Engaged learning does need to become a more prominent part of our classrooms, just like our other traditional learning and instructional styles. But it does have to begin to come from the background and take more of a strong presence in our classrooms. In the end, we're educators. But we're not just any educators, we're Catholic educators. We owe our students all that God provides, all of God's goodness. And so engaged learning draws out the best of their learning potential. So thank you for participating in this screencast. There is a real need for engaged learning in our classrooms today. It is a rigorous form of education, and our classrooms, our schools really need this type of learning brought into it. Please look for more screencasts from us here at NCEA, and from all of us, God bless.